to tune in and watch if they would like. So that should be running now. Then the last thing I need to do is just read through our hearing script. This basically just covers the procedure for the hearing. And then we'll jump right into the applicant's presentation. So this is the April 27th, 2022 session of the zoning hearing examiner docket. My name is David Sturkey. I'm the zoning hearing examiner for the city of Cincinnati, and I'll preside over this hearing. The case before us today is case number ZHUV210016. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and opposing parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. Sorry, excuse me. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and the supplemental rules of the zoning hearing examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any opposing party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing. Unless a party has submitted evidence or testimony in the form of writing or digitally prior to this hearing, the hearing will proceed as follows. The applicant, the applicant's attorney, or the applicant's agent will first present the applicant's case. I will, for our purposes here today, I will allow Mr. Burke or Mr. Tepe, if they would like, they could sort of direct examine, or they could just sort of introduce witnesses that they would like to testify in whatever order they think is appropriate. I'll give any number of you, all or one of you, an opportunity to testify. I'm really sort of open-ended on how you all want to orient your presentation and tell me why this project is appropriate and tell me more about the project. That's completely up to you, all of you in the room. After, though, you've given an opportunity to present the application, I will then move to the public, in this case, Mr. Hawk, to give him an opportunity to provide any testimony that he would like me to hear about the project as well. If the applicant is represented by an attorney, which of course in this case they are, the applicant's attorney may cross-examine any person who has testified at this hearing. I will also give Doug Owen and Emily Ahouse an opportunity to provide any testimony they think is appropriate. Let's see. In the event that any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to an application, the applicant shall have an opportunity to rebut that testimony and or argument offered in opposition. After the applicant has been given that opportunity, the applicant can make any closing statements. After all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. So just a quick recap, applicant presentation, I'll move to Mr. Hawk. I'll give Doug Owen and or Emily Ahouse an opportunity to provide any testimony that they would like. I'll allow the attorneys in the room for Terex to ask questions of anyone that's testified. And then I'll allow Terex to provide any rebuttal or any additional testimony that they would like based on any of the testimony from the public or from the zoning department. And then finally, give you guys an opportunity to make any closing statements. After all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or make any comments. I may also refuse to consider hearsay testimony. That's discretionary. It's generally, any testimony you want to provide that consists of statements made by someone who's not present at this hearing. In the event of any technical difficulties or unforeseen circumstances, I may continue or postpone this hearing. I'll do my best to troubleshoot any tech issues on the fly, but if there's something that really prevents us from meaningfully going forward with the hearing, I may continue or postpone the hearing at my discretion. Okay. Last thing I need to do is swear in witnesses. I think just based on the orientation of the room, I may just do that on a case-by-case basis. So I'll just swear in folks as they testify for this hearing. Okay, so who's going to be taking the lead here for us today? Mr. Tepe?
I am.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much, and good afternoon. I, along with Tim Burke, serve as co-counsel to Falling Leaves and Terex, the developer of this property. With us today are Tom Rowe, Steve Stewart, Carl Giesecke, and Pastor Steve Ham. We've got a couple other people in here that are Don Murphy. Other people that are here in case some things come up, but we can get as far into the weeds as the hearing examiner would like us to do, or we can kind of breeze through. We are very proud of the application that we put together. We believe that it's detailed and provides all the facts and evidence needed to give our client what it is that they're looking for. The property is well known. It's at the corner of Michigan and Area Avenue, right in Hyde Park Square. It's currently occupied by the Hyde Park Baptist Church. It's zoned CNP and lies in an urban design district number 4. It contains about a 9,300 square foot structure built in 1925, as well as some retail space along Michigan Avenue. It's about 0.355 acres, so it's kind of a tight site. I want to commend the city zoning staff for putting together a very, very comprehensive report of 13 pages that kind of walks through exactly why we're here today. Why are we here today? We're seeking 4 approvals from the hearing examiner. A use variance for the demolition of an existing structure, which has not been ordered demolished by the director of B&I. Urban design review for demolition and construction within the urban design overlay. Dimensional variance for 14 feet for height, for max height of 65 feet. And a special exception for setbacks along Michigan and Erie. A little bit of color on how those setbacks came into play. It is a 0-foot setback, but there's a reason why that was put in there, and it's quite a compelling reason. Again, the staff did a great job of really laying out what it is that we're looking for. What I think our client really should be most proud of, Tim and I giggled about this. He's done many more of these than I have. I've never quite seen a Hyde Park Community Council letter so strongly in favor of the development. We can read through this thing, but it shows that a little bit of effort up front will really pay dividends in the end. The development team worked tirelessly with not only the community council, but the business association. And that produced 2 letters of support for the development. They should be in the record. If they're not, I believe they are, because we double checked. More on that community engagement from Tom Rowe. And so where are we now? We've got an existing building that we will prove by clear and convincing evidence is functionally obsolete and physically and economically infeasible to utilize. It doesn't work. They've looked at it from a number of different angles. And I want to thank Emily, who pushed us to even go further to try to analyze some additional uses that to see if they worked, and that would have been trying to convert the church into residential. It clearly doesn't work. Churches just don't convert, and particularly when you hear some of the details of the condition of the church, it just try as they might, doesn't work. And there's also a complicating factor of a sewer that you'll hear a little bit about here. So we've looked at this thing, and we'll go through some pro formas that Tom Rowe and his team put together. Look, at the end of the day, we'd like to demolish this building and really utilize this corner. It's an underutilized corner as it relates to maximizing its potential. They want to do a great first-class mixed-use development, first floor retail, and then some multifamily on top. You'll see that as described by the architect, its massing, scale, and everything else is well in keeping with what is surrounding. You know, it doesn't necessarily exactly mirror what's across the street of Michigan Terrace, but it certainly complements and fits in very, very nicely. And that was kind of some of the guidance that the community council had given our client, saying, look across the street. It shouldn't be just like that, but it should complement and be similar to. And the team is very proud of exactly what it is that they have are presenting to you. So in this order, you're going to hear from Pastor Steve Ham, who's going to talk about, hey, we've been there for a while with their decision to sell and why. Tom Rowe here, who will talk about the economic infeasibility, of utilizing the existing structure and community outreach. We have Steve Stewart, the engineer, who could touch on this interesting sewer that runs underneath the property. And we have Carl Giesecke, the project architect, who will tell you about the really, really cool, exciting development that we hope will replace a structure that has served the community well, but it has run out of time. And I forgot Don Murphy, who will tell you about his marketing efforts and the offers that they received, and then the offer that they received from Falling Leaves, who was the winning bid. So that's sort of where we are. Tim and I are going to divide and conquer, if it's okay with you.
Sure.
Great.
And as we go through some of the witnesses, we're also, I think, going to put up on, if we can share the screen, put up some of the exhibits that are in the record, but that we do want to call attention to as we go through this hearing.
Sure, absolutely.
First, as Tom has indicated, is Pastor Ham. Pastor, would you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Pastor Steve Ham, pastor of Hyde Park Baptist Church.
And Dave, do you want to swear him in?
I do, yes. The Mr. Ham, if you could raise your right hand, I need you to answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And
Go ahead.
how long have you been the pastor at Hyde Park Baptist?
I've been there for 5 years.
And can you briefly describe why the congregation made a decision to sell the property?
Yeah, there's a number of reasons, and they stem from before my time with the previous pastor as well. We are a growing congregation, but we are also finding that it has been enormously difficult for our church not having our own parking lot. That's one of the biggest aspects. We don't have the ability of having our own parking. The spaces in the church it's something that we can't really change, but they are really not they're really not helpful for modern ministry. Having rooms close for ministry, Sunday school, all of those sorts of things, and in not having our own parking, and parking being a little bit more difficult in that area at times, it's very difficult to run any midweek ministry. So we just can't do that. The building itself has, apart from the alterations that would be needed for ministry, it doesn't have ADA. So it's very difficult, even for people who don't have disabilities. The bathrooms are up behind the pulpit. People tend to find it's very hard to use. So the set out is not good, but just not being able to look after older folks properly is not helpful. Somebody would have to walk down the ramp, down the library ramp to get into fellowship areas that are underneath the building. And also we every spring through to fall, we're constantly concerned about parking gets like impossible. We've had people actually not even be able to stay in our church because it's just so difficult for them. And this is not a slight against the farmers market. We think it's lovely for the community to have a farmers market, but it makes it near impossible for ministry and parking on a Sunday morning for
Because the
our
farmers
church as
market
well.
is very successful.
The
Isn't it?
farmers market does well, and so it's good there. We have at times put a little thing out the front of our church to reach out to people in the farmers market too. It's not that we don't use it, but it's just that it makes it just impossible for finding parks, and it stops people from coming. The current state of the church, it's needed it desperately needs a new roof, new HVAC, lots of cosmetic work, lots of repairs. We've done patches while we've been there. But the problem is, for at least a decade, our congregation has not wanted to make major investment in that building because it's been at least that long that we have wanted to find a new premises and move to a layout that would be helpful, have parking, fix all of the things that we are currently doing, which is what we're doing right now.
And Pastor, you prepared a letter that is in the record here, and I believe it's up on the screen now. And that appears in the record as Exhibit D to the initial letter and application that was filed with the city. Do you recall that letter?
Yes.
Is the letter true and accurate in the facts as you have stated them?
Yes.
One last question. While the property was on the market, did you receive any serious interests from any churches to move into the property?
Not serious interests.
Okay. No other questions?
Thanks. I think I'll hold questions for individual witnesses, maybe unless there's something particularly pressing I want to ask. I'll wait till the end, just in case someone else covered it.
Great. Next, we're going to go with Don Murphy. I think he needs to be sworn in.
Mr. Murphy, if you could raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
For the purpose of the record, we're going to be relying on Exhibit 5 to the March 25, 2022 KMK letter.
Okay.
Murphy, what is it that you do for a living?
I'm a commercial real estate broker with Cushman and Wakefield. I've been a commercial broker for 27 years. The last 10 years I've spent focused on multifamily, residential, senior living, student housing type of product.
And what's your involvement with the property?
I contacted Steve Ham after I heard that they were interested in potentially selling the property. And prior to listing, met with Steve, had numerous conversations with him about what would be the highest and best use, because again, my specialty is on the residential side, and specifically, I work with quite a few developers, not only on ground up, but also on redevelopment, adaptive reuse projects. I met, in order to determine what was the highest and best use, toward the property, even talked internally to some of our brokers on the retail side, on the office side, to see what their thoughts would be. And ultimately came up with the conclusion that the highest and best use would be on the residential.
Did you, what were your marketing efforts? Was it you just marketed locally, or was there a broader?
No, absolutely. Just about every property we market, and especially a property like this, that's in an A plus location. I'm going to market this through a couple of different methods. Our Cushman and Wakefield internal database, which is going to go out to thousands of potential developers, not just on the residential side, but again, it also reached developers that would be interested in potential retail or office uses. It went out to probably about 2,500 residential developers, not only greater Cincinnati, but more in the Midwest, and even throughout all 50 states. I also utilize more public websites for commercial property, which are called LoopNet and CoStar. I made numerous phone calls to local churches and in the area that I thought might have an interest in contacting them directly and through emails, and also called Real Estate 101, call the people that are close by. And I called the Cincinnati Public Library, since they are right next door to the property. They had an initial interest. They never ended up touring the property, but I know that they looked at it strongly. And after about 2-3 weeks, their broker called me and said they had no further interest.
As a result of your as a result of your marketing efforts, did you get some interest from some potential purchasers?
Yes. Yeah.
About how many?
We had probably 10 to 12 groups that had a serious interest. A couple of the groups from out of town, out of Indianapolis, out of Columbus. I toured the property, I think I figured out 10, 12, 15 times maybe. Every one of those potential groups were looking at, on the residential side, either be it apartments, market rate apartments, or potential condominiums.
So did anybody who expressed an interest in this property ever express an interest in preserving the building?
No, just because of the functional obsolescence and the condition. No, not one group. I know they looked at it, they tried to figure it out, but ultimately no one was going to reuse the property.
And so you did no offers or any other interest from other churches?
No.
And all the offers that you received or letters of intent were all for some type of mixed use?
Mixed use, condominiums, apartments, potential.
I don't think I have any other questions.
Do you want to clarify that he wants to leave?
I was going to do, yeah. Mr. Strickey, if it's okay, if you have any questions for him, I know he's got an appointment that he would like to get to, if at all possible. So if you have any questions, if you could ask them now, or if you'd still like to reserve that would be fine. We'll make them hold.
I don't think that I do. Or not any that I suspect maybe someone else might be able to answer. So if Mr. Murphy needs to go to another appointment, that's fine.
That's great. And his testimony is pretty much summed up in that exhibit 5 that is on the screen right now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your understanding.
Then we will go to Mr. Stewart. You want to go to Tom first? I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's how we had it, right?
Okay.
So we're going to go with Tom Rowe. He's not been sworn in either.
you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. Could you please tell the hearing examiner what it is that you do for a living?
So I'm a real estate developer and co-owner of Terex Development Construction. We're a construction and development company headquartered here in Cincinnati, offices in Oakley, right next door to Hyde Park. I've been in the commercial real estate business for over 20 years. I'm a licensed lawyer in the state of Ohio. I've held a real estate broker license in the state of Michigan. And so I've got a lot of experience in development and redevelopment.
His bio is included as Exhibit A to Exhibit 3 of the March 25th KMK law letter for reference. You've had a chance to review all the materials that have been submitted to the city in connection with this application, correct?
That's correct.
And are all the factual assertions that are contained in those true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
They are, with one small exception. I did see that we noted that the retail section of the building was built in 1990. I think that was closer to like 1915 or 1920. But with the exception of that, all is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge, I believe.
Thanks for that clarification. You've got an intimate familiarity with this current structure, correct?
Correct.
Can you kind of walk through it from a development perspective and kind of tell the hearing examiner why it doesn't work for a lot of reasons, but physically, what are some of the issues that are associated with it?
Yeah, so we started looking at this building. It's obviously a large structure that's suited well for large presentations, but not well suited to other uses. The building itself is older, so it doesn't comply with modern ADA requirements. Obviously, modern building code, or frankly, modern zoning for that matter. It wouldn't be easily configured to other uses. We also looked at the building systems. The HVAC is very antiquated, needs to be completely replaced. The mechanical systems are old and decrepit. There's asbestos throughout the building itself. The roof is actively leaking into the building. And one of the biggest issues is frankly, there's just no parking associated with the building. And so any new use would have a challenge providing parking, because in our modern day, right, wrong, or indifferent, we're all still vehicle motivated and need a place to park our cars. And then we also noted, I think Mr. Stewart's going to talk a little bit more about a major sewer trunk line that runs underneath the building. It's a 48-inch brick sewer that was built obviously prior to 1910 or whenever the building was built. And one of our biggest concerns was putting a bunch of money into an existing structure that could fail later because this brick sewer line decides to fall in or otherwise fail.
Is it strictly, is it a combined sewer, what they call a combined sewer?
It is, yeah.
Which is stormwater and sanitary?
Stormwater and sanitary, and it's the primary trunk line, from what I understand, that goes out of Hyde Park and down into Mount Lookout and down to the river.
You've looked at this property several ways, and I'll refer to the hearing examiner first to exhibit would be exhibit 3 to the March 25 letter. That is your letter that contains an office pro forma?
That's correct. One of the alternative uses that we looked at would be to convert it into a kind of a creative office concept, put new demising walls in, and then maintain the retail along Michigan, because there's really no alternative use for those spaces.
So just quickly, as it relates to that retail space, you've also looked at it other ways. Is that same hold true for other uses that you look at, meaning preserving the retail along Michigan?
Yeah, just based upon the configuration, the orientation, we preserve the retail in all the different scenarios that we looked at, including the other one, which is a residential conversion.
So we have this exhibit B. Could you tell the hearing examiner there's a lot of numbers on there. We can get down and dirty into these numbers if it's necessary, but kind of hit the highlights, if you will, a couple of the driving numbers here.
Yeah, so to convert the building into office, we worked with our construction team to come up with some estimates on cost. to convert the building over. We ultimately decided to use a number that was $3.7 million to invest, or $4.6 million to invest in the project to convert it into office. Ultimately, we also spoke to brokers in the market about rental rates for office and retail. I believe we have letters or emails in our letter that kind of support our assumptions at $18 a square foot for those spaces. Those rental rates did contemplate the lack of parking and the niche nature of the asset at the end of the day. We assumed a capitalization rate of 7.5% at exit and a 10-year hold period, which is our standard hold period for any development that we look at. Ultimately, as we looked at these rents and this cost with a financial structure underneath it, meaning we assumed a reasonable amount of debt being utilized, it resulted in a negative rate of return to ownership of 6.25%, and ultimately a loss of capital of $524,000. So we looked at that and said, wow, we're going to get an incredibly high risk asset. Meaning we don't ultimately, costs are always more than you expect in a renovation, and you get a negative return, so it's not viable at the end of the day.
Right. I just want to clear something up real quick. If you try to repurpose this existing building, it would be a change of use. And what impact, if any, would that have on your look at it? Would it require variances or other things like that?
Yeah, so actually under either the office conversion or the residential conversion, based upon there not being any parking available to the asset, I believe we would have needed a variance for either of those uses. Also, those change of uses would have triggered modern building code. So we would have had to bring the assets up to modern standards from a access, fire suppression, ADA perspective, and those costs are astronomical.
You live in Hyde Park, correct?
I do.
Parking is a big issue in Hyde Park Square, right?
What parking?
Exactly. No more further questions on that topic. We were pushed, and thank you very much to the city for doing that. You looked at other uses, correct? What other uses did you look at for this repurposed building?
So we did an analysis of converting the building into a multifamily retail use, meaning keeping the retail and converting the rest of the building into multifamily. We believe, based on the square footage, we could get approximately 9 units of multifamily in the building. And I think I summarized this in an April 15th letter that's attached to a TMK letter.
Actually, I think it was its own submittal. It came on April 15th from Terex.
So for those 9 units, we did assume $1.50 per square foot in rent, which is reasonable based upon no parking available to the residents, no amenities to speak of available to the residents, and a very old and tired building at the end of the day. We applied $18 a square foot to the retail, just as we did in the office analysis. At a baseline, we were going to have to put $5.8 million into the building to facilitate that project. And we assumed a 7.5% capitalization rate at exit, again, a 10-year hold. Ultimately, this yielded a negative 11% return and a loss to the ownership in the amount of $2.4 million. So it got worse. Again, high risk, very big negative return. No one in the right mind would pursue that opportunity.
But you didn't stop there, did you?
No, so we also looked at, what if we had the land for free? Means, I kid sellers all the time. If you give me the building, it still doesn't work, right? And so we actually studied it that way, where we ran the model at a $0 purchase price. And while it did generate a profit, that profit was only $31,000. Again, based on a 5.8, I think it was a $5.8 million investment.
So you would invest $5.8 million, and then what was your hold period?
10 years.
10 years later, you would get a return on your $5.8 million of how much?
$31,000. And so that's you know, we look a lot at internal rates of return when we're analyzing investments. It's about a 0.25% internal rate of return. Just for perspective, we generally target 20% internal rate of return on a risky deal like this, where you don't know what your costs are going to be. You've got a little uncertainty with the quality of the building. You might even want that to approach 25% at the end of the day. So this, even as $0 cost basis, the rates of return were far below anything that a reasonable investor would put their money to use for.
And so for purposes of the record, the pro forma also has an analysis of land at 50% of the purchase price. So if it doesn't work at 0, it clearly doesn't work at 50%, correct?
That's correct.
Let's talk about your community outreach and the work you guys did in order to try to obtain these approvals. Can you kind of walk the hearing examiner through your initial connection with the community council, the business association, neighboring properties, et cetera? So
Absolutely. You know, so we recognize right away that this is an iconic corner on an iconic square, you know, in a nice neighborhood of Cincinnati, a neighborhood that's known for being very active in terms of new properties being developed, new ideas being created, and that sort of thing. So we're honestly somewhat terrified, but we engaged with the Hyde Park Community Council.
they can be tough.
They can be very difficult because they view the Hyde Park as an asset and something that they're challenged to preserve, you know, for the community. So I respect that, but it can be very challenging. But we engaged with the zoning committee first, just because we had some questions on zoning and we knew that we were going to be pursuing zoning variances at the end of the day to facilitate our development. The zoning committee meetings, we met with one of the individuals, then we met with the full committee on 2 different occasions. We received a lot of feedback through those meetings in terms of setbacks and height. We reviewed all the existing buildings on Hyde Park Square with that committee, looking at both their architectural detail and height, just to make sure that what we were thinking was consistent with the rest of the square. And at the end of the day, they had a big impact on our project. You know, we listened, and one of the biggest items was setbacks. You know, so we were not showing a setback along Erie Avenue at first, just based upon the zoning requirements. So we had a 0-line setback both along Erie and Michigan. The zoning committee really felt that, you know, the Michigan Terrace building across the street had a nice semi-public presence in front of it that was a little bit more welcoming than just a sheer brick face. And then they also felt it was important to preserve the sight lines out of the square and up Erie Avenue. And so based upon that, we took some measurements of other setbacks in the area and worked with them in great detail to finally agree upon the setbacks as we proposed in our application. Following our work with the zoning committee, we did meet with the Hyde Park Neighborhood Council Board of Trustees, their full membership, presented the project to them, and then per their suggestion, held a public meeting where all the residents of Hyde Park were welcome to attend and to ask questions of Carl, the designer, and myself as the developer. Following all that work, we ultimately received the support of the Hyde Park Neighborhood Council per their letter.
Is that the letter that's shown up there?
It is.
And you were copied on that, correct?
I was copied on that, dated April 21st, 2022.
Great. And then how about with respect to the business association?
The Hyde Park Business Association, they've been reinvigorated of late, and they've got quite a presence in the square, trying to invigorate business and foot traffic for success of all the businesses in the area. We met with their leadership, and then we also met with their full membership to show them the project, share what our goals were for the project, and ultimately they also support our proposed variance requests from the city of Cincinnati.
And that would be the April 26th letter that's shown above.
That's correct. And I think it's worth noting that they're actually excited to see high quality retail being added to the square. A rising tide lifts all boats. They like the fact that we've got residents that are going to be coming to the square, more residents living right on the square, just because it represents more feet on the street, more eyes and more billfolds, to frequent and support our businesses in the area.
So there's a dentist's office that abuts this property, is that correct?
There is, there's a dentist office directly south of this property. It's a former single family home, but it's been operated as a dentist office. We also reached out to them to share what we're trying to do with the property in an effort to be a good neighbor. And they also voiced their support for the project and demonstrated that in a written letter dated May 24th, 2022.
Great. Then finally, how about the public library that abuts the property? Have they been contacted and aware of the project?
They have been. We've actually worked a great deal with them. This sewer that runs underneath our building runs through the parking lot of the public library next door. So necessarily any improvement to that sewer would require us working in the library parking lot to the rear. During that process, they voiced some challenges that they have in their rear parking lot with flooding, with slope of the parking lot. It's very difficult for people in wheelchairs to wheel their way up to the library from that back parking lot. And then the amount of parking spaces was also an issue where they'd like to increase that if they can. And so we've been working very closely with the library. We've got the prosecutor's office has approved an easement for our work with the library. And they're, at least to date, they're tickled pink that they're going to have a parking lot that is brought up from an elevation perspective, 4 to 6 feet, I believe, which should help mitigate the ponding issues they have back there. We're going to add some parking spaces for them. And I think it even includes a check valve so that it helps limit any backflow that they'll experience in their rear parking lot in the future. So we've developed a wonderful working relationship with them and intend to continue to do so.
Great. Now, finally, I guess just one question: Is this project going to seek any public financing, incentives, or abatements?
No. So the project will not be seeking a commercial real estate tax abatement that we've seen a lot of in the news lately. It'll be completely self-sufficient and will be a tax-paying entity to Hamilton County and the city of Cincinnati.
For purposes of the record, the property is currently tax exempt, or at least a portion of it, because of its use as a religious institution. So this will put this property back on the tax roll, so to speak.
It will.
Great. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Rowe, quick question. You mentioned a dentist's office directly behind. Is that 3440 Michigan Avenue?
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha. And you said that they are in support of this.
That's correct. And they've written a letter to that effect.
Okay.
It should be contained within the record.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
And I think it's also worth mentioning too that, there's really no residential uses around this site. So there are, obviously Mr. Hawk lives in a condominium across the street, but there's no single family homes immediately adjacent. That's something else that we looked at when we were thinking about redeveloping the project.
Thank you.
Now we move to the project civil engineer, Steve Stewart. Needs to be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr.
Thank you.
Stewart, you state your name, please.
Steve Stewart.
And you are the managing principal of Genesis Design,
Correct.
with 30 years experience as an Ohio registered engineer
Yes.
and significant experience in working with the Metropolitan Sewer District.
Yes, for all those 30 years.
And Exhibit 6 to the KMK letter to Cassandra Maines of March 24th is a letter that you wrote dated March 24th, 2022. Is that right?
Yes.
I believe we have that up on the board now. Are the statements contained in that letter a true and accurate description of the sewer that runs under this site?
Yes.
And on the page 2 of that letter is what you labeled figure 1. And does that accurately depict the current location of that sewer?
Yes, it does.
And in the staff report that is a part of the record, staff notes that in discussing the sewer issue, they state, staff recommends the applicant reach out to MSD as soon as possible to discuss the implication of the sewer. Can you describe what, if any, steps have been taken to reach out and work with MSD with regard to this sewer line?
Yeah, for about 12 months since they started looking at the property, I've been talking to my contacts for years at MSD about the concept of relocating the sanitary sewer. And so they've approved the concept of it. And on, I believe it was March 24th of this year, we submitted construction documents to relocate it because we're separating its own separate project. And we've received review comments from them April 14th. So they're well aware of the project.
And the review comments that you've received, do they cause any difficulty in complying with them?
No, we call them their kind of basic review comments, but the overall concept of relocating has been okayed, so we say.
I have no other questions for Mr. Stewart.
Thank you. Any other witnesses?
Yes. And now we'll go to Carl Bisecki, who does need to be sworn in.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you state your name, please?
Carl Piesecke.
Got it wrong.
We know.
You were very close.
And you are an architect and a member of AIA,
Yes, I am.
and you are a partner and owner in the firm of GRAMD,
Yes,
which has offices in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Portland.
yes, Portland, Oregon.
And where is your Cincinnati office?
It's on Erie Avenue on the square, across the street from the Fifth Third building.
And you were part of the team that worked with Tom in meeting with the Hyde Park Neighborhood Council?
That's right. Tom and I presented our concepts and refined the design through our meetings with the neighborhood council.
Did you actually have to change your design in order to comply with some of the requests from the neighborhood council?
Yes, we've made several changes, several rounds of alterations to our drawing in response to the comments that we had from the community and from neighborhood council.
In the record, 5 or 6 pages are attached as Exhibit A to the KMK letter. Are 6 pages of plans, and Exhibit 2 to the KMK letter of March 25th is an additional page of plans. I'd like to walk through those pages just briefly with you. Can you generally describe what the first page is that's on the screen now?
Okay, this is the site plan, so it shows the grade level outline of the building with the setbacks, namely. It shows, you can see it's come up in our conversation previously, the Erie Avenue setbacks. It's sort of wedge shape there. I've got my pointer here so I can show you this space here. So between the front of the building and the property line, when we're talking about the setback, that's what we're talking about. This dimension, if you can read it, I cannot, but it says about 8 feet. And at this end, it grows to 18 feet 3. So that's one of the variance requests. There's also a request, this setback, there's a small setback, I think that says 2 feet 9 inches along Michigan, just to improve the sidewalk is skinnier than you would like.
So
front of
does
us.
that modification make the sidewalk somewhat more walkable?
Yes, it improves the walkability there in front of the building for pedestrian traffic on Michigan Avenue. That's mostly what's there.
And while it didn't require a variance, was there also a change made to the plans at the driveway entrance to the site?
Yes, well, there are two things to show here. One, this number 25, that is there, this is where the sewer passes through the property. And so that's part of the accommodations made.
When it's relocated?
The relocate, right, but currently it's over here, so right in the middle of the property. The relocated position would be over here. That was our initial design, had that 25-foot driveway, trying to make some use out of the space that we're not allowed to build on because of the sewer easement. And then comments from the community and concern about pedestrians interacting with traffic coming off the site. We increased that. You can see where we put a meter pit and some utilities along the side of the building, and increase the size of the setback there. So there's better visibility. So you can imagine if it's not super clear from this drawing, but a car exiting the site would be able to see a pedestrian coming down Michigan Avenue before they pulled out. So improved safety.
Let's go to the next page.
So this is the lower level. So I don't know if everyone's aware, but so the library is above on this drawing, and so this is showing the lower level parking. It's below grade. You can see the ramp is at the top of the drawing here. So the circulation is cars enter from Michigan. They come in. This is happening above. You don't see it on this drawing. And then when they reach this point, they turn and they drive down this ramp, and they end up here in the basement level, which is where most of the parking is the parking that serves the residential tenants. There are 24 spaces down here. That's 2 per residential unit, which is more than is required by zoning. But we thought there tend to be large apartments, and that 2 spaces per apartment would be appropriate.
Let's go to the next page.
And this is back to grade level, which we saw before, only now you can see not just the outline, but what the interior of the building on that level. You can see there's additional parking up here on grade. So again, this is the entrance. And what we just saw was descending this ramp to the lower level parking, but there's the alternative, make an earlier turn off into this grade level parking. And this is the parking that serves the grade level retail, which is these 2 spaces up here. And there are 16 spaces on this level, which also exceeds the zoning minimum requirement for off-street parking.
And the next 2 pages, and we'll go through them one at a time. These are the
This one comes next. You want to do this? Go in order.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this shows a conceptual layout of the apartments. There are 4 apartments on each floor. So the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stories would all have this same layout. It's not super clear. There's unit 1 is the top left corner. Unit 2 is the bottom left corner. Unit 3 is top right. Sorry, I got the numbers wrong, but you get the idea. There are 4 units on each level. I believe they are all 2-bedroom apartments with dens. They're large. They're very generous.
And Mr. Sturkey, if you happen to be looking for this in the record, it occurs later in the record than the other floor plans and the elevations that we're talking about. So
Thank you.
I'll go to the elevations. Next drawing.
There is the 2 elevations that are street elevations. The upper one is the Erie Avenue elevation, showing what it looks like if you're on Erie Avenue. I'll point out on here, and then the other one is Michigan Avenue. So you can see the first level is has a lot more glass. It's the storefront. It's retail development, and then the upper floors are the residential with balconies. I'll clarify here. The height variance we asked for was 55 feet. On this, all the numbers have 100 added to them, so that would be 155. On this drawing, you can see on this drawing, it shows 153 something. When we submitted these drawings, we hadn't yet worked. We knew that we might need to go to 55 feet for structural reasons. We hadn't, the time that this was drawn, we hadn't gotten very far with our structural drawing. And in fact, as we've developed the structural details for this project, we do need to go to 55 feet. So it's what's in the written part of the variance application asked for 55, and so there's no change. It's just I wanted to point out that this graphic shows 52, even though or 53 rather, even though we're asking for 55.
And specifically, the March 7th letter at page 6 indicates a height variance is required to permit construction of a 55-foot structure.
Right.
Which doesn't, that number does not include what we're going to get to on the next page, the stairwell and elevator shaft.
Right. Which is also visible here. This little pop-up, there's a second. So I think the overall height variance includes this pop-up, but there's reference to, certainly in the staff report, there's reference to the height of the parapet also. So I want to point that out.
And if we can go to the next page, the elevation.
So here is the view from, if you were at the dentist office, which is to the south of the building looking back to the north. And down here is if you were in the backyard of the library looking west. So this is the east side, the east face of the building here. And here you can see more clearly that pop-up on top. And that's the overrun for the elevator and also roof access for the top of the stair construction. And that extends to 65 feet, I believe is what we had in the written portion. Again, I'm not sure if this graphic shows this 65 foot number. It's 63 too, but 65 is what we actually requested.
And again, 65 foot is what's described on page 6 of the letter of March 7th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To be just real quick question, without the penthouse access structure there, the height is 55.
Correct.
Is that structure going to be visible from street view?
Yes. And here, actually, if I go on to the next drawing, I think it shows, did we include the pop-ups on the other buildings? No, we had a different version that showed the overrun. Most of these buildings have similar penthouse overruns on the roofs that aren't shown on this drawing, but we should have included them. But yes, you can, that would be visible from other locations.
Thanks.
And I wish we'd included the drawing that shows that it's not unusual for the square, that several of these buildings have the same layout.
And it's worth noting that the community council is well aware of the penthouse overrun, and it was looked at in relation to the Michigan Terrace building, which I think has a total footage of 78 feet up to the top of the elevator penthouse on that building approximately. So we're still lower than the Michigan Terrace building, and the community council felt comfortable with that overrun elevation.
And I'll point out that that overrun, this is the Michigan Terrace building right here. And it does not show that.
Yeah, is that across the street?
Correct. That's across Erie from
Directly across the street.
directly across Erie.
Got it.
So just to clarify, this is if you're standing in the middle of Erie Avenue looking south, and this is if you're standing in the middle of Michigan looking east.
Got it.
And Carl, in addition to comparing the height of the building you propose to build to Michigan Terrace across the street, how does the height compare to some of the historic buildings on Hyde Park Square?
That's a good point. So Hyde Park design area includes a variety of heights of buildings, and there are old and new buildings that are taller than the building we're proposing. So ours fits in to the mix. There are historical buildings. You can see this one far down to the right. That's the building at the corner of Erie and Edwards, and it's taller than the building we're proposing. Also, the building across it, which doesn't appear on this drawing, the one that has Mesa Loca on the first floor, is also taller than the building we're proposing. And across the street, the new construction, the newest building on the square, the Michigan Terrace, is taller than what we're proposing. So, and in all those cases, when I say taller, I'm including the penthouse, not just the parapet.
I have no other questions for Carl, and we have no other witnesses to present at this point.
Okay, thank you. So I think I will, at this point, I think I'll keep moving with witnesses and save some questions. I'm gonna give Mr. Hawk an opportunity. Sorry, again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Hawk, did you want to add any testimony at all to this? If so, I'll need to swear you in.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
If you raise your right hand, you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
It is. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I guess, I do actually have a couple of follow-on questions, if I can just ask a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I know we're referring to the elevator bay as a penthouse. Is it really a penthouse, or is it just an elevator bay that's coming up?
It's just an elevator overrun, Chris. It'll contain the stair tower that exits the roof for roof access and the elevator equipment, that's housed in that as well.
Is there an intent to develop further on the roof, put up structures or a roof deck or anything like that?
There's no intent for any public space on that roof that would be like an amenity or any sort of congregating area at all. No.
Okay, just a standard roof. Okay. Another question, Tom, on your pro forma, which I think was really, really thorough. So I think that all looks good and sounds good. Did you consider condo development as opposed to rental, and possibly redeveloping the site as just pure condo? Would the pro forma look worse? I'm assuming that if your development cost was $4 million, and then you have a purchase price, it almost became cost prohibitive to develop as a condo. Is that what your takeaway was?
It would, and not only that, Chris, that the challenge with condominiumizing that building is it's old and it isn't laid out well for modern living, and so condos would be even more prohibitive than multifamily. Multifamily users tend to be a little bit more understanding of some points of interest, let's call them, some inconvenience associated with their units, whereas a condo buyer wants to have exactly what they want and wants it to be nice and finished. And so I've looked at a number of condominium opportunities, and this one is not even close to something that would pencil at all. I mean, I'd be concerned with selling those units at all, given the condition of the existing building, its infrastructure, and the challenges with the layouts and windows that would be afforded to the condominium buyers.
Okay. What lease rate did you assume on the new units?
On the residential, we assumed $1.50 per square foot. So $1.50, that's consistent, you know, in a very modern building, you know, like for instance, over here in Oakley Station, modern building with tons of amenities, a pool, you can get, you know, $2 rents. But we felt $1.50 was appropriate, given that there's no parking available to those tenants. There's really no opportunity to even buy monthly parking around the square. And so we were concerned with whether or not we could even rent those units, you know, given that our residents would have a hard time. They'd be struck with street parking and would have to move their cars by, you know, 9 a.m. I think it is.
What's the average square footage of the units, residential units?
So of those that we modeled out, we had about 1,500 feet, 1,400 feet.
Okay.
1461 is the number.
Okay.
And I think it's worth noting too that the units that we're putting back in are rather large, meaning they're going to be very nicely appointed, you know, targeting you know, the empty nester population. This won't be, you know, college student housing by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to be very nice.
There was one request that came up, you know, within our building, and it's more around just given the fact that we have, you know, residential units across the street from your construction project. Is you know, one of our neighbors just wanted to make sure that the intent is that construction is going to be during sort of normal business hours. You know, that construction will begin roughly around that 8 a.m. timeframe, and then end hopefully, you know, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, that sort of thing.
We will, and we're somewhat governed on that by city ordinance. So there are city ordinances that do prescribe when you can make noise and whatnot. And we, I live in Hyde Park. You know, others on our team also live in Hyde Park. We'll be as sensitive as we can be. I will not lie, during the demolition and the you know, there will be some noise during the day, and you know, as the building comes up, there will be some noise as well. But you know, it is it's not stick built, so you're not going to hear a lot of hammering and nailing. It's going to be a steel structure, so it's a you know, hopefully a little less noisy, but we'll work to minimize that noise though, Chris, and make sure that it's during working hours and not, you know, mornings and evenings.
Okay. Just in closing, the one thing I would say is I think it's really, quite frankly, impressive the way you guys engage the community on this. You know, I think that taking into consideration all the feedback, the way you designed the building to match the, you know, the decor sort of Hyde Park Square, you know, taking the initiative to actually bake into your requirements, the setback, things like that I think, you know, I think go a long way to really engaging the broader community. So, and I'm familiar obviously with some of the work that you've done, you know, Tom, and things like that. And I think that this will be, you know, in my opinion, a nice building in the square.
Thank you. We hope so. It's truly intended to be an amenity and something that's going to be a good bookend to the square. I mean, we looked at this site as having a huge responsibility to the ambiance of Hyde Park Square, and we're going to work hard to convert on that responsibility.
Well, I'll be looking right at your construction. So, so if you need a report out, yeah, I'll give you a call and let you know how things are going. So that's all I had.
Thanks, Mr. Hawk. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for your time and your testimony here today.
Yep.
Okay, I think I'll turn to the zoning department. Did you all want to add anything here today?
I don't have a whole lot to add, but I have a couple things that I would mention.
Sure.
So basically,
Let me swear you in.
yeah,
You
okay.
You shall give me the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thanks.
So generally speaking, staff does support the project. We do feel that there are examples in the vicinity for similar sized buildings, including the massing, the height, as well as the siding on the buildings, being on the edge, on the outside block of the main square. Most of those buildings do have setbacks that kind of align with the square itself. So we do feel that that setback is appropriate. And as the applicant team has mentioned, there are several buildings, including historic and new construction in the square that do have similar heights, and some of those actually are taller than the proposed structure. So we do feel that the zoning relief that's requested for the setbacks and the height is appropriate. One thing I will say on the height is, in the staff report, I've written this based off the drawings that were submitted. So if that building is 65 feet high, David, you'll need to adjust your recommendation on that, because I was basing my analysis on the drawings. So as far as the use variance goes, churches are notoriously hard buildings to repurpose, especially a church of this size and in this location. So based on the analysis that was provided, we did feel that that was sufficient to recommend approval of the use variance for the demolition. And then, yeah, I think that's about all that I wanted to just reiterate from the staff report.
Okay, thanks. Emily, is Doug speaking on behalf of the zoning department today?
Yeah, Doug's report really clearly and in detail explained our analysis, and we appreciate the applicants working with us through multiple requests for additional information and providing the really detailed economic analysis on the use variance.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, so I'm going to allow the attorneys to make some closing statements here. I think I'll maybe try to pepper in some questions now, though, maybe. And if you feel like you're going to cover this and go through some of the standards in your closing, feel free to sort of jump into that. But I think you've all made a very good case for why this is not really economically feasible to try to keep the building, keep the church as is. I agree with that. But is it your position that this building does not architecturally contribute to the Hyde Park square or the urban design overlay in this district? You guys are on mute if someone's trying to talk.
The building currently is non-conforming with zoning, but let me ask Tom Rowe and Carl, in your conversations with the Hyde Park Neighborhood Council, did they have any serious concerns about this building being an architecturally contributing building to the square?
It didn't come up once, no. No, in fact, the retail along Michigan is antiquated. It's frankly, it's not very pretty. It's not an attractive building, nor does it have really a lot of architectural detail along Michigan that offers any real attraction. The front of the church being masonry, some may have said that it was contributing to the square, but frankly, that's the only stone of that appearance that's anywhere around the square. And at the end of the day, it would appear that our building will actually enhance the architectural features of the square.
And Mr. Sturkey, I might also point out that Hyde Park Neighborhood Council would have had the opportunity under the about to become effective regulations of designating this as a contributing building, and they've made no effort to do that.
Have they completed that assessment, to your knowledge?
They have completed that assessment, but they've clearly been aware of the fact for months that the development team was working on this project, talking with them for months. They had certainly had the opportunity to do that had they thought it was important, and they clearly did not. And you have the April 21st letter from the Neighborhood Council, and I was going to read one paragraph from it in my closing. Maybe I can do that now and make the point. The zoning committee would also like to note that the development team for this project has been exceptionally engaged and responsive throughout the process to our design feedback and to questions and concerns raised by the HPNC trustees, Hyde Park neighbors. The development team has been sensitive to the historic nature of Hyde Park Square. They clearly had the opportunity to make some point about this building. They did not, and has remained committed to creating a structure that will complement the historic nature of the existing buildings on the square. We firmly believe that the proposed new building will be an asset to Hyde Park Square and a great addition to our neighborhood.
Okay. So again, this may be a part of the closing, and if it is, I think this is my last question. I really don't see a big issue with the height relative to the surrounding buildings, nor the setbacks. And so my final question was going to be if you could sort of run through why you believe the new design is compatible with the Hyde Park urban design plan and with the standards set out in 1437.
Carl, do you want to comment on that?
I can talk about the design. I'm not 100% sure what standards are that are in 1437 off the top of my head. So if you could lead me through like what are the topics I should be discussing, that would be helpful.
So I'm looking at 143709 here.
Dave, I'm not how much detail you want us to go into in this. We've got the staff report that considers that all of it was laid out in what we submitted that the staff relied on as they developed the staff report.
Sure. It's up to you. I mean, if you wanted to defer to the staff report and the written materials, that's fine. Just wanted to give you an opportunity to.
I would again make the point that one of the things that we were concerned about as the development team got started with this is, geez, we got to deal with the folks in Hyde Park and the Hyde Park Neighborhood Council, and they're experts at knowing these things far better than developers and attorneys are. And in the end, because of cooperatively working between the development team and the neighborhood council, nobody had any questions about the building complying with the standards of the urban design for Hyde Park Square.
But it's your contention that it of course that it does, right?
Absolutely.
As confirmed by staff as well. If you look at our March 7 letter, starting at page 2, paragraph 5, we talk about the urban design review and the standards of ground signs and awning standards, mechanical and equipment and utility standards of new construction, demolition, and all of those things. We go through in great length for several pages laying out, why we believe that it complies with those standards. And fortunately, staff has agreed, and so has the community council, who frankly, I've never seen a letter like the ones they wrote. So we feel pretty good that we've met every standard necessary for all the relief that is before you.
Okay. So I guess we can shift then into any closing remarks or anything else in closing or otherwise.
Ricky, I think we can keep closing very brief. First, to say thank you to staff, to Doug and Emily, but somebody who's not on the screen, who I think we all need to say thank you to, is Cassandra, who put up with an awful lot and who responded very quickly to questions and comments and requests to put things in the record or give people access to the record. She was extremely helpful throughout. We believe that the record in front of you, the documents that have been submitted, the testimony that you've heard today under oath, all of the comments that you've heard justify the relief that has been asked for. I appreciate the fact that Doug, and he's right, he relied on what was in the plans and looking at the height to the top of the parapet and to the top of the what's referred to as the penthouse, the elevator shaft. When the written comments had the higher height by 2 feet in each case. And we do request that if the hearing examiner sees fit to approve this project, and we hope you will, that you will approve it, recognizing those 2 corrections, which are nobody's fault, but the fact that the development team submitted 2 different numbers. The urban design review for demolition, hopefully this is the last time you will have to consider a use variance for something like this, although I'm aware of the fact that this is not the first time you've had to do it, but we do hope, and I think you've indicated that you know that this building is not sustainable as is. And what the development team here is offering is something that will in the end be very beneficial to the future of Hyde Park Square. So I hope that both the urban design review for the demolition and new construction will be approved, as well as the use variance and the dimensional variances for both the height and special exception variance for the setbacks will be approved. I think we've laid out all of the reasons for that, either in the documentation that you already have or in the testimony that you've heard today. And frankly, I don't know of any reason to go any further with a closing argument at this point. Thank you for your attention today.
Sure, thank you, and thanks to everyone for their time and their testimony here today. Yeah, so I have had a chance to review the application, the materials, the drawings, the thorough staff report. Based on that and the testimony that I've heard today, I am going to approve this application for relief. As you know, I need to formalize that in a written decision, which typically takes about 2 weeks. We have been getting an unusually high amount of applications in the past month, so it may extend slightly longer than that. I'll do everything I can to get this to you as quickly as possible, hopefully knowing that this will be approved can help you move forward in some other areas. Let's see, as soon as I finish that, as you guys know, I will put that into a PDF and email it to everyone who was in the hearing today, if I have your contact. And as soon as you have that, you can start working with the zoning department on moving forward with the permits.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
If anyone has any questions, in the meantime, feel free to reach out to myself or Cassandra or the zoning department. If you'd like a status update on where I'm at on the decision, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I will let you know where I'm at with that. I think that's it. Any other questions right now?
No, thank you.
All right, well, best of luck with the project. Hope you all have a wonderful day. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks for joining.